Hey, everybody. Hi, my name is Rebecca Giannini. I'm a parenting and relationship coach, and this is my group. If you're here, it's because your relationships matter to you and you are looking for new ways to communicate and you want to improve your relationships with the people that matter most to you. So if that's you, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. I go live every single week on Mondays at 5:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And so mark your calendars. I'll be here every week, and I do take topic requests. So if you have any questions, put them in the comments. I don't always see the comments on the live as they happen. Sometimes I can only see them after the fact. So if you have comments or questions, put them there, and I will get back to them as soon as I can. Tonight, we are talking about making stories or giving advice in age-appropriate ways to kids. So oftentimes people feel the need to hide feelings from their kids or to hide their experiences from their kids. And it's really important that we can talk about what's going on in our lives while not putting kids in charge of being our comfort or being in charge of regulating for us. And oftentimes people who are aware that that can be a problem will try and avoid sharing, oversharing with their kids, which is helpful, but that can be taken to an extreme where we're not trusting kids or even equipping them to become better humans because we're trying to avoid by trying to avoid one thing, we avoid offering them skills. So if you are, if you have been working on your parenting journey for a long time, you know that it's not appropriate to expect your child to be your emotional support or to be, in role of therapist or anything like that. Which is a problem for some families. For some families, oversharing is a huge issue. And so if that is an issue for you, this is going to help. So we don't want to overshare, but we also don't want to undershare. And so oftentimes people go back and forth between those two different poles, and then we have more problems, right? So if you are somebody who currently struggles with oversharing and telling your kids too much, what happens is it causes the child undue stress and anxiety and it puts them in the position where they feel like they have to help you regulate, because basically what's happening is they're looking around at their environment, and in their experience, their caregiver is struggling to regulate, and so they can take on the role of parent. And it can create this really confusing dynamic where the child doesn't have what they need to help you regulate, and you're expecting it of them, but it causes them to feel stress. And then there are all sorts of issues that come as a result of that. So that is something that happens. Then another thing that on the opposite side of the spectrum, there are people who just keep all of their lives to themselves and don't talk about anything in front of the kids and don't allow the kids to see them really as a whole person, but they see them in only the role of mom or only in the role of dad. And so the kids really struggle to become a part of a community instead that they're sort of self-centered and they don't kind of see other people's experiences. And so we don't want either of those outcomes. What we want is for kids to be a part of a community, but in an appropriate role for them. So what that means is we're going to need to learn how to share an age-appropriate version of the same story. So any story, even really horrible stories, even really difficult, sad stories, can be shared with a child of any age if you have the age-appropriate version of that. So let's say, for example, you have a parent who dies. Well, if the version of the story that you're going to tell your 15-year-old child is going to be different than the version of the story that you tell your 3-year-old, right? So you're probably not going to be as sharing as much with a 3-year-old. You shouldn't be sharing as much as with a 3-year-old or a 5 or a 7-year-old that you would with a 15-year-old or a 21-year-old, right? So oftentimes people kind of have this all or nothing approach. Like I can tell them what's going on, or I won't tell them what's going on, but they can't figure out, how do I tell the 5-year-old version of that story? How do I tell the 3-year-old version of that story? And one of the ways that people try and keep things from their kids is like the child will instinctively sense that something's wrong. They'll say something like, "What's wrong, Mom?" Or "What happened, Dad?" Or whatever it is that they say. And the parent who is trying not to overshare will say, "Nothing's wrong, I'm okay." And this causes them to kind of doubt their experience, because they can intuitively sense that something is off, but their caretaker, mom or dad, is telling them that everything's fine. And so that's going against their experience. And so it's confusing for them. And we don't want that for them. It's okay to tell your kids that you're sad. It's okay to tell your kids what's going on in your life, so long as you're giving them the age appropriate version of the story. So if, for example, a parent dies, or somebody's going through cancer, or their teacher is, sick, or whatever it is, and you know that it's going to have a pretty big impact on the child, what you want to do is first find a place of find a moment and figure out, okay, what's a 3-year-old going to understand about the story? What's a 5-year-old going to understand about the story? They're going to understand mom is sad or dad is sad. So we'll start with that. I'm just feeling really sad about something. Someone I care about is really sick, and I'm worried that they are feeling so sick and they're feeling so bad. We can tell that version of the story, and they might have questions. Who's sick? What are they sick with? Is it a cold? And that's oftentimes where people get stuck in what to say and with oversharing, because if a child says, who's sick? Or, is it a cold? And you're like, no, it's cancer and they might die. And, so you're answering the, 35-year-old version of the story, but they're asking it from the point of a 3-year-old or from the point of a 5-year-old. So when we're listening to their questions, we want to listen for the version of the question they're asking as well. So when they say, who's sick? Our brain goes, well, it's my friend so-and-so, or it's my dad so-and-so, or it's my sibling such and such. But that's the 40-year-old version of the story. That's the 35-year-old version of the story. The 5-year-old answer to that story, so that they're not worried about their, aunt dying, might be, well, I don't really want to talk about who it is, but it's somebody that I love, and it's just something I'm worried about right now. And you let yourself be sad with them. And you can also allow them to show up for you without putting them in charge of helping you regulate. It's okay for a child to show up for you and offer you care, so long as their experience is not that they have to do that in order for you to be okay. So you might say something like, I'm going to be crying. I'm going to have some tears. I'm feeling really sad, but I'm okay. It's going to be a little while and I'm going to be sad, but I'm going to be okay. If you want, you could sit here with me, and that would feel really loving. If you could sit here with me and just hold my hand while I'm sad, we could be sad together, and that's okay. But I'm going to be okay. And you sort of make this request of, if you want to help me feel better, here's what would feel like love, but I'm going to be okay on my own. And that's really the version of the story that they need to hear, that being sad is okay, being mad is okay, being afraid is okay, that the feelings are going to happen. And it's okay to have these feelings. The feelings are going to pass, that we can handle having these feelings. But if you want to show up for me, here's what would feel like love. And you might say something different, or you might make a different request of a 7-year-old or a 10-year-old, right? And with a 10-year-old, you might be able to tell them more of that story. You might be able to tell them, oh, I'm really worried and I'm thinking about, what I should be doing to help them, or I'm worried about if they'll be okay, and I'm just feeling really sad. And you might tell them more of the story than you would tell for a younger child, or you might tell them who it is. That might be important for them so that they can start processing their feelings about it, that sort of thing. But we want to focus on the age-appropriate version of the story for whatever person we're talking to. And sometimes it's not a matter of age. Sometimes it's a matter of emotional maturity. Sometimes you might be going through an experience, and as much as you would want, your parent is not the person who can show up for you or offer you the support that you need in that moment. Or your sibling might not be the person who's able to offer you that support. So you want to tell the age appropriate version of the story, but also for your other relationships, you also want to recognize what is this person's capability, and are they capable of offering you the support that you're wanting in that moment? Sometimes they're not. There was another thing I wanted to cover on this. I guess the main point, though, is that we are looking at the person who's in front of us, looking at the child in front of us, and recognizing what is the story of the version, what is the version of the story that's going to allow this child to see a part of my experience, but not be in charge of helping me feel better. And how can I allow them to show up for me? How can I make it available for, how can I help them show up for me without making them in charge? Because, you know, children are really intuitive and they have a lot of instinctive compassion. And so when you shut down or when you don't tell them any of that story, you're not only losing out on the really profound experience of having a child express care, but you're also missing out on the opportunity to show them how to show up for someone, because eventually your child will be a part of the greater community, and you want them to be able to show up for people in a meaningful way. There was this was maybe about a year or so ago, maybe a little bit longer. There was this car accident that that happened like right in front of me. And I think I might make this the subject of a totally separate live, because there are a couple of different parts of it that I would want to address, and I don't think I have time tonight to do all of it. But there was this, it was basically somebody who didn't have English as a first language. So there was an older woman who was hit by a car, and a person, her granddaughter, witnessed it. And so the older woman didn't speak English, and the granddaughter did. And so in the middle of this terrible accident where this child was in such incredible distress, the child was having to translate for her grandma and for the EMTs. And there was this moment where I was sitting with her, and luckily I was able to be there in that moment and offer the child some comfort, and I was able to listen to her. But she was having this experience where all of these really well-meaning people were showing up for her in a way that was causing her more distress than it was soothing. And what was happening is they were seeing how distressed the child was, and they were trying to calm her down, and they were also trying to soothe themselves, because they didn't, you know, EMTs aren't trained to help somebody regulate their emotions. They're trained to do what they're trained to do. And so there was this moment where they were, you know, all of these people, the firefighters and the EMTs and all of these people were telling her, "You're okay, everything's okay." And she was kind of ignoring it at first. And she's translating, and she's having this trauma in her experience. And then she kind of loses it and said, she was like, "Nothing's okay. Everything is not okay. Stop saying it's okay. She's bleeding. She just got hit by a car." And I was so happy for her that she had that language, but I was also simultaneously so sad for her that she, in the middle of this horrible experience, had all of these people who were not listening to her and were telling her things that were just so far from the truth, and they were just not able to honor the impact of what was happening. And it was so sad. Every time I drive by that street, I think about it, and it reminds me of how important it is to do this work and to really learn to show up for people. they're struggling, because when we can't, we miss our chance. And it's so deeply sad when we can't show up for people. And we all deserve for people to show up for us. And so the reason why I was thinking about that is because, children are so intuitive, and they know what's going on. And so oftentimes as adults, we want to shield them from what's going on, but they're experiencing it too. And so when we're trying to shield them from what's going on, but they know it, we're asking them to doubt their experience, and we're in essence lying to them about what's going on, and it causes lack of trust, and it causes more distress. So what we want to do is learn how to share the age appropriate version of the story. And when the ENTs were gone and I was just sitting with her, I was able to do that for her. And I was so glad that was the case, but it was so sad. And here's an example of what I mean. So in that moment, she's crying. She's like going back and forth between wanting to call her mom, and, so anyway, I was saying things to her like, this is so scary. You're worried about your grandma. Oh, she's not here, and you want to be there with her. And I was right now I'm doing it more quickly for you because we're on a time limit here, but in that moment, I was leaving a lot of space in between these reflections. She was saying something, or she was crying, or she was silent, and I was offering these reflections to her that were fully honoring the moment that she was having. And it's really beautiful, and it's really profound when you can show up for somebody in their distress, even if you can't fix it, even if you can't change the outcome. Just being seen in that moment is so powerful. And it's so important, because children, they know when something's wrong, they know when things are okay, and they know when things are wrong. And so when you are sharing the age appropriate version of the story, well, what we want to make sure that we're not dismissing what is to soothe ourselves, or to try and soothe that person. We want to just honor what is. I do think I'm going to make a part 2 for the other parts of that story that are applicable, but not applicable to this part that we're talking about tonight. So yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about, and I will see you next week. If you have any questions, let me know, and I will talk to you soon. Okay, bye-bye.